Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to the PA the FI Way podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and on today's episode, we have a very special guest. We have Lauren joining us today. So welcome to the show, Lauren.
Thanks for having me. I love talking about financial independence and all the things. So this is great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you. And just so that the listeners know, Lauren and I know each other because I actually precepted her back when I was in family medicine. She was one of my amazing students. And then when I transitioned into psychiatry, Lauren ended up being at the clinic that I ended up working at. So we actually were coworkers for a while. So that was really fun to circle back and end up being a colleague to a student that I had in the past. So I'm so excited to have you here today, Lauren.
Yeah, that was the best.
Right? Totally.
Yeah.
So, Lauren, for the listeners, would you mind sharing a little bit about yourself as a PA so they can be caught up to speed?
Of course. Yeah. So I went to undergraduate school at Michigan State and then PA school at Bethel University in Minneapolis, and graduated in 2018. So what is that, like 5 years or so far as a PA?
Yeah.
I currently work in outpatient psychiatry, and that's all that I've worked in as far as specialty so far.
Awesome. And so, being a fellow psych PA, also, would you share what you like about the specialty working in outpatient psychiatry?
Oh, yes. I think biggest thing that I like is, well, hard to skip over the flexibility piece of outpatient psychiatry. There is a really nice balance very nice work-life balance,
Sure.
as far as that goes. But I really love the piece of seeing people pretty frequently. So you're seeing your patients, pretty frequently. So it's really has been a great opportunity to really build relationships with them, and helping them in their journey. So that's been really special to me in this specialty of psychiatry. So
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. I was curious how that would be coming from family medicine over to psychiatry, if I would lose some of that continuity of care or follow ups with my patients. But yes, you definitely see many of your patients quite frequently, which I enjoy that part as well. And then, since this is a financial podcast, would you mind sharing how much student loan debt did you end up graduating with from PA school? And then also, what was your plan at the time for paying back your student loan debt?
yeah, such a good question. So, and I feel like maybe at some point later in the podcast too, I'll circle back around to it, as far as from a goal perspective or standpoint. So graduating PA school, I had the exact number, I think I've almost erased from my mind, but I think it was around $180,000.
Sure.
And then with my husband, so I graduated in 2018. I got married in 2018 too. So collectively, we had around 200,000
Wow.
in debt. And so um, I want to preface too with, obviously we'll be talking about, real estate today, and as that's a way that we invest, that we were really in debt, and we've come a long way. And so, like I said, I'll circle back to that as an encouragement, hopefully to the listeners. But yeah, so we had, we'll just say around 200,000 of debt. And at the time when we first got married, I would say our plan for paying it back was let's do this.
Sure.
Let's put as much in as we can per month or per paycheck, and get it down as quickly as possible. And so that went on for quite a while as I got my first PA school job. And I'll kind of just keep going on our journey as far as with student loan debt, while we're on the topic of it. And so we were really, putting in probably 3,000, plus, every single month
Wow, that's
towards
awesome.
whatever we could. At the time too, I should say, we were living not in the best, in a very cheap cheap housing, and so that was really helpful as far as like, okay, we're not putting all this money towards rent, so we can put a little bit more towards student loans. And so that was probably our first throughout 2019. And then a lot of you know about COVID-19 happening and student loans being put on pause.
Sure.
And so I will say that when student loans became on pause, that's where we also paused a little bit as far as, okay, what do we want to, what's our route here? What's our goal? Do we want to keep paying these down as, rapidly as we had? I think at that point we might have been down to like 90, 100,000 or something along those, around that. I'm kind of just thinking of the time. It's hard to remember exact numbers, but around that. And so we kind of were at a pause at that point, with them being paused from the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, that's where I can pause there, because I know we're going to talk more about as far as just financial independence and different things, because this is kind of the point in our journey of where we, decided to go some different routes as far as investing.
Yeah.
But so, to all that to say too, that's still where we're at with my student loans as far as amount as well. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for bringing us up to speed with those details. And before we go into the next part here, I also want to ask out of curiosity, do you feel like you and your husband have always been on the same page with finances, or do you feel like one of you leans one way or tends to have a certain instinct or mentality of one way, and then the other one is a little bit opposite, and the two of you have to have discussions and try to compromise sometimes? Or how do you feel like the two of you work together when it comes to financial goals?
yeah, so I would say that my husband Clint has always, as far as financial goals and investing in particular, he has always wanted to go the more particular real estate route.
Sure.
And so before him, I really had no idea what that even entailed. I met him around 24, 25. Before that, it was just, it was not in my lingo at all, or not in my knowledge. So I didn't know anything about particularly real estate investing. And so that was all new to me, how to, the financial, or the what comes with that, as far as how you, need to save, and different ways to go about managing your finances, was all very new to me. However, I will say I got on board pretty quick. And so I was thankful that he, was pretty passionate about it and was able to teach me a lot, to where he really educated me around different types of investing. And so we've never, thankfully, necessarily been on the totally different pages. But it's been an awesome, if anything, learning experience, not just about real estate, but investing just in general, because he's had some of that knowledge. So good. Yeah. Good teaching has come from him, which has helped shape my view of finances.
That's great. And I was super excited to hear about the fact that you invest in real estate back when we used to work together, and that you knew about the financial independence community and things like that. So I always encourage my listeners to, try to feel out some of your coworkers, especially other fellow PAs, because it's really fun to have a local PA network that's into financial independence. But I'm curious, Lauren, how and when did you first learn about the concept of financial independence?
Yeah, so I would say, other than, my husband having background knowledge on real estate investing in particular, really like diving deep into financial independence, I first learned about it through our realtor who invited me to we and I don't think we had a house yet at this point,
Sure.
or any properties, but she invited me to be a part of a group called Win Make Give, or that was the like course that we were diving into, to learn about financial independence, financial freedom, another, you could say too. And so that's where it that doing that course along with some other ladies who were like-minded, really opened my eyes to the concept of financial freedom, financial independence. And that was back in probably 2019 or so.
Sure. And back in 2019, what was it about what you were learning that was such a light bulb moment for you?
Yes, the phrase just came to my mind, and I'm stealing it from Win Make Give, but it's to do what you want when you want with who you want.
Right? I love that.
And that, yeah, and that is, just the buzz phrase, I should say, of Win Make Give that really sparked, something in me of really do what you want when you want with who you want. And learning to approach that not in like a selfish way, but in a, okay, actually this could be a really awesome way of, you know living that out, but also stewarding our money really well. So
Yeah, definitely. And people tend to be concerned about using the word selfish, but I think that having boundaries and things like that and being a little bit of selfish with your time is super important and with your finances, at least while you're building
yes.
wealth. And, then you can get to the point where you can give more and give of your time even along the way. So, yes, I think that that phrase of, doing what you want, when you want, and with who you want throughout your life
Hmm.
is a really nice place to be. So it's always a great goal to aim for and helps you protect your boundaries along the way too.
Totally agree.
So let's talk more about real estate investing. I'm really excited to talk about this with you. Why did you and Clint decide to invest in real estate?
Yes. So again, I had mentioned that he, kind of had a lot of this background knowledge in real estate investing. And, I think what it came down to is, and what I learned from the course is, what are our goals? And particularly with real estate investing, that as we were diving more into it, maybe calculating out some scenarios, some numbers, real estate investing helped us, or what we could perceive anyway, was probably going to help us with our goals of, and particularly goals being, okay, we don't want to work forever, or we want to be home with future kids, or we want to be able to just, give like crazy, whatever that might look like. And so that, I think we have to take the step back and first figure out what our particular goals are, as far as, I just mentioned a few that we had. And so because we came up with these goals, and okay, we, if we can, we'd love to not work by age 40, or at first we're like age 35. And that's super ambitious and awesome. But coming up with a list with yourself or with you and your partner, about, what you want life to look like, when it comes to finances, but all these other areas too. And for us, real estate investing helped us get there, or is what we feel like is helping us get there. Now, there's so many amazing ways to invest. And so this is just one area that, it's not that it's an easier road than another one by any means. But that's why we stepped into and started choosing real estate investing, is because we felt like we could reach our goals, relatively quickly. Obviously, you got to work really hard within that, but that's really why we chose that path, this particular path, I would say, as far as like 90% of our investing goes.
Sure. So, talking a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that come with real estate investing, you have shared with me before about how you have bought some properties that needed improvements and some fixing up and things like that. So, do you have any stories to share or to tell, maybe some funny ones or some interesting ones that the listeners would find entertaining?
Yeah, with any investing, there's going to be ups and downs, and having to turn a quarter quick and figure out what to do. And I think as far as home improvements, so we have had to do a lot of those. We, as in mostly my husband, Clint, who's quite handy. Although I should say to you listeners, you could say started from the bottom, and YouTube University is how he learned how to do everything. I
That's
kid you
awesome.
not. He did not have a parent teach him. And so I say that to be an encouragement to people if they feel like I could never fix something, or I could never do that. But if you have the, stamina, perseverance in you, drive, you will figure it out how to put those floors in. So, but, our first property, I think a fun story from our first one is so we bought our first duplex, and the family, one of the sides of the duplex, the family had lived there for 25 years. I mean,
Wow.
green carpet that's still in there. There's smokers. I mean, you go in there and you're like, oh boy, like, what are we taking on? And redoing that and gutting that out. And of course, there are tears along the way, right? But what was cool about that is they were at first very distraught that we were having to kind of, kick them out, to say lightly. And we felt awful about that. But what was cool is it actually, after 25 years of renting, it drove them to buy a house. And they ended up
Oh,
totally upgrading and buying an amazing house in Maplewood, Minnesota. Sometimes they would still drive by as we lived there and showed us pictures of their house
oh, that's cool.
that they lived in, and were super proud to, now own something themselves. And so that was really special. It ended up, we were really nervous, because at first they were upset to kick them out, and then it turned out to be a really great thing for that family. So that was pretty fun. As far as other remodel things, I mean, uh, goodness, that's really what stands out to me as far as like a fun story. But yeah, we've had to do lots of remodeling, and so that certainly comes with real estate investing, just depending on what type you like to do. But
Sure.
for our budget, you had to do some remodeling.
Yeah, that's great. And do you both still self manage the properties or do you work with any manager at all?
Yeah, as of right now, we do self manage. So I would say Clint probably does majority of that. We'll self manage. His job just right now is much more flexible. So if a tenant will text him in the middle of the day, he's able to respond often more quickly to that. So right now we're self managing. So we'll see how, continue to see how that goes until it feels too much.
Sure. Has it been going well so far over the years?
Yeah, yep. I think that's a good question, and we love to talk to people about. It just sparked a question in me, or something to cover, because I think a lot of times, at least what I thought too before I knew much about real estate investing, is it seems like tenants are always going to be doing this, or everything's always going to be breaking, and so you're going to be fixing things all the time. And sure, if you buy a 1900 home or something really old like that, you're more likely to have more repairs and things like that going into it. But my husband always says every way of investing, or just like having a job, comes with headaches.
Sure.
And so naturally, real estate can come with them too. But, thankfully, it's been a really great experience. And headaches, things that come up are relatively few and far between. I think if we joke about it, like if we were to compare it to another job or something, that the headaches, and when they do come up, as long as you just are honest with your tenants and respond and you try to do your best to fix the problem, usually issues and problems are fixed pretty quickly. And so part of financial independence too, going back to, is having an emergency fund, and I'm sure you've talked about that on here before. And so if you can build that up a little bit, if a basement floods, which we've had that happen a couple times,
Oh, wow.
or something backs up, as far as like plumbing, okay, we're just going to bite the bullet. We've got an emergency fund. That's why we have this. We're just
Sure.
going to have somebody else do it, take care of it, and then it's done. And so, I say that as an example, but hopefully not to scare people away. Of course, things like that do come up, but you'd be surprised at the amount of headaches, as far as them being pretty few and far between. So,
Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting because the emergency fund you are touching on, my suspicion is that it's mostly an emergency fund for your properties, and then you very likely have a personal emergency fund too. So that is interesting to think about, that you have to have extra funds just in case for those properties, in addition to your personal potential financial emergencies too.
totally.
Awesome. And there are so many ways that you can do real estate investing, but I'm curious, what kind of properties do you have?
Yeah. So, maybe I can give a little background as far as how we got to this too, because I want to encourage listeners just as far as, where we were with debt, and how we got to where we are now we have 5 properties. And so, starting off with, like I said, $200,000 of debt. We paid it down. We worked a lot. We lived very, I would say, below our means. And so really frugal with money and things like that. And so then we decided to save and buy our first duplex. We particularly wanted to do a duplex, and so it's far less glamorous than a single family home, I will say. But we knew that as one of our goals, like I mentioned, was okay, at least one of our first goals is, can we live for free? Can we not eliminate rent, or a house payment? And so we decided to buy a duplex. And with that in particular, we did an FHA loan, as it was our first home. And we'll talk about resources at the end, as far as what is FHA and how do I learn about these different things. So we bought our first duplex, and because of rent prices, at that point with that home, we were able to live for free. And so because we had tenants on the other side, we lived in one side, we did not have a mortgage or a house payment. So because of that, we were able to start saving more. Okay, we're able to save more from our paychecks. And so that led to, and my husband also is working as well, but that led to our second property that fall, which was also a duplex. And then so that was our second property. And that one, we didn't live in that. And so we were able to cash flow from that second one, which means once you pay the mortgage, whatever is left goes in your pocket, is kind of that investment piece. So, so our second one was a duplex as well. Then, because of that, we were again able to, it's kind of reminds me of a snowball effect a little bit. So we were able to continue to keep saving. So then our third property actually came out of nowhere, which was really cool. It came out of nowhere in the sense of, my husband, as he is just has an eye for certain situations, scenarios with real estate. His mom actually was wanting to sell her single family home. And so we ended up working out. She tried to sell it. It was this whole thing. We didn't even think about buying it, to be honest. And then after like a year of her trying, Clint said, well, what if we buy that, fix it up, rent it, that sort of thing. And so we ended up with our third property being a single family home. That little did we know, was a hot market. So renting that, we were able to rent it pretty high and quickly, and worked out a deal with his mom as far as buying it. And so because of that, the snowball was able to keep rolling as far as, okay, now we're cash flowing, I don't know, let's just say $2,000 a month. So we don't have a house payment, but then on top of our salaries and things like that, we're bringing in 2,000. I don't know the exact number, but that was then able to lead us to our fourth property, which was just this last year. And it's I will say this too, we're outside of the Twin Cities. So real estate is hot everywhere. Mortgages are high, prices are still high, but we invest as of right now. Most of our properties are in Wisconsin in smaller markets. And so that means, houses are cheaper, that sort of thing. So because of that, we were able to buy our fourth this past summer in a smaller market in Wisconsin, and that was a duplex as well. And so, again, snowball kind of rolling. We got both sides rented finally, and so then we were able to cash flow from that after the mortgage. And then most recently, as of Wednesday, we acquired our fifth duplex. And again, I'll circle back to resources. How we were able to acquire this fifth duplex was through something called creative financing, with where you work with the seller. So us as buyers work with the seller to kind of come up with a payment plan, if you will, of owning the property over time. So the seller acts as the bank, essentially.
Sure.
So you avoid mortgage and a lot of other things like that. And so it's called seller finance. So again, that'll be in some of the resources we talk about later. But so that is how we got to our five. And then what reminds me though of mentioning about our five properties is because we started with talking about student loans. I don't want to forget to mention this. We have not really touched those. And so again, as our goal, as we were talking through goals and what we wanted, paying those off became kind of down on the list as far as importance. And so you might be like, how are you coming up with all this money? How do you pay for some of these down payments and things? I will say that throughout the whole pandemic, we personally chose, just with what we want to achieve. Like I said, goals, you got to think about those for yourself. But we chose not to pay off our student loans. So those are still, unfortunately, they're coming back now, but those stayed where they were. So we didn't put any money into those. And so that also, I will say, if the pandemic didn't happen, we probably would have had a little bit of a different story here as far as properties, but because we didn't have to dump all the money into student loans. Just wanted to note though that that's one of the reasons why we were, kind of able to go on this path. So again, everybody has, unique investing strategies. And so that's just how we got where we are with our five properties. And then I should say where we live currently, we decided to Airbnb the other side.
Oh,
So we
okay.
do have one unit that is a short-term rental as well that we're experimenting with.
Very interesting. Well, thanks for breaking that down for us. So it sounds like with the five properties, four of them are duplexes. So there you have
Hmm.
what are called nine doors. Real estate investing usually talks about doors that are part of
Yep.
the properties. But then you have another short term rental now that you're testing out Airbnb. But then the rest were the long term rentals. So that's super
Yes.
interesting, Lauren. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to talk about the short term rental in a little bit too,
Hmm.
but let's go back to the majority of your rentals being long term rentals. What was the decision behind going that route versus short term rentals, even midterm rentals or things like that?
Yeah, I would say, particularly for the ease of long term renters opposed to short term or midterm, we, particularly with our long term rentals, we pretty much always sign a 2-year lease. And so it's a little bit more hands off in that sense, is where we don't have to turn it over as often.
Sure.
Long terms just tend to be a little bit easier, less work. Now,
Yeah.
of course, they all come with work if things come up, but ultimately, the long term rentals are far more hands off.
Very cool. And so how long have you had this short-term rental for, and how has that been going?
Yeah, so we have had it since August of this year.
Okay.
We launched our Airbnb in River Falls, Wisconsin here, and so we live. So it's a duplex that we live in. So we live on one side, and then the other side is a short-term rental. And we've always been intrigued by short-term rentals. We've always dreamed like, oh, I'd love one in Florida. Let's do that. So on for a while, we're looking up houses to buy in Florida, and ultimately, we decided to just start it with where we're living, so next
Sure.
door. And are we glad that we did that? Because if somebody needs something, or hot water heater breaks, I mean, yes, you could totally call a plumber and figure it out that way, but it's been really nice being right next door as we are learning. But we've just been really intrigued by Airbnb, short term rentals, for the financial benefits that you can have or you can gain from them, to where you might be making double. There's a potential to make double, triple what you could in rent as a long term renter. Trade off is more work, with
Sure.
turnovers and things like that. But we thought, okay, this is a pretty low risk as far as we live next door. Our mortgage on this house, particularly, is very low. Where if you buy a newer home nowadays and have a really large mortgage, it might feel pretty risky, and nerve wracking if you don't get it filled or rented through Airbnb or VRBO or for short term rental. Um, and so we felt like, okay, this is a relatively low risk. Mortgage is pretty low. We just need it to rent X amount of times per month to kind of break even, if you will. And so that's why we thought, let's give it a try.
That's awesome. Super exciting. And out of curiosity, are you both self-managing and doing the cleaning and flipping between the short-term renters as well?
Yeah, so as far as next door with our short-term rental, we were cleaning it at first, and then it started to pick up, and so we hired cleaning because that just made things a lot more a lot more easy on us, and that we didn't have to worry about it or if we were out of town. So we are self-managing as far as the apps go and managing bookings and people messaging you questions and things like that. We do all of that right now with the one, and it has felt very doable. I think especially because we're really not booked all the time where we are.
Sure.
It's not a very popular area, so it's been pretty easy to self manage. And then we hired a cleaner probably about a month or so ago, which has been helpful.
Awesome. That's great to take some of that off of your plate while you're trying to figure it out at least and see how it goes.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like you haven't sold any of your properties yet. Do you plan on keeping them for many, many years to come? Or is part of your guys' plan to potentially sell some of them and maybe, roll the profits into another property in the future? Or have you guys had that discussion yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, as of right now, we do not plan to necessarily sell any. However, with two properties, we would plan to refinance them
Okay.
in order so you can do something where you can refinance the house and because one of our houses, we have a pretty high mortgage because we just got it this summer. So, people, might know that mortgage rates were really high. So, if a mortgage rates decrease significantly, we would probably refinance that, take the money out, and put it into a new property. Same with the single family home as well. We would plan to refinance it, put a mortgage, change the mortgage up and take money out and invest those into more properties. That would be the goal with those as far as once mortgage rates decrease. So we have thought about that. As far as our other properties, the mortgage rates are very low. And so
Nice.
we probably, for them being like 2.9, it just is tough to sell
Sure.
that. unless somebody was to approach us with what I mentioned earlier, a seller finance deal or situation, we'd be open to something like that. So as of now, we're keeping the course until those mortgage rates decrease.
It's totally valid, and fingers crossed that they do somewhat soon.
Agreed.
So, we've talked a lot about your real estate investing journey. What type of resources have you and Clint found to be helpful throughout this journey?
Yeah, so I had mentioned Win Make Give earlier, and so Win Make Give it's just a website, and again, this is, I believe it's a free course, and it was very it came with podcasts, so you'd follow each week. There was a week one, week two, and then it came along with a free workbook that you could walk through, and it really dives into, it breaks everything down so you can see really where you're at financially. And what I love is the podcast host, Ben Kinney. I mean, pretty much grew up with nothing and walks through his journey of investing, or just, to become financially independent. And it's really encouraging, because everybody can do it if you are determined. You can become financially free, you can become financially independent, and it starts with just looking at where you're at. Like, we just have to see where we're at, and you got to start from somewhere. And so his course, or this podcast with the workbooks, I highly recommend. And so that's winmakegive.com, and then you can go to, particularly the course is called the Wealth Series, and I'm on the website now looking at it. It's 2.0, and so that is where we really dove into the nitty gritty of finances, where we're at. Okay, now how can we make steps forward? And then the other resource I have would be the podcast called Bigger Pockets, which maybe a lot of people have heard of before as well. There is so many episodes, but if there's like one particular thing about real estate you want to know, they probably have a podcast on it. So they have a podcast on everything real estate. I would say that's a podcast we listen to a lot on road trips, all the up to date, getting up to date with real estate and mortgages, and so that's a great resource as well.
Yeah, Bigger Pockets is definitely one that I have listened to some of the podcast episodes on too. They also have some books, and then with their podcast, they have offshoots of other podcasts. So it's this giant network that Bigger Pockets has, where they have all different types of resources for people who are interested in potentially real estate investing. But I will
Mm-hmm.
include that resource along with Win Make Give in the show notes for today's episode. So thank you for sharing those resources today.
Yeah, and one thing that popped into my mind as you said that, when you said books, is the classic book Rich Dad Poor Dad,
Sure.
that I had never heard of, never read before. My husband had told me about that book that he read like in high school, and I think that's what really intrigued him about real estate investing in particular. But if anything, just managing money, and how to try to navigate that well. That's a great easy read book as well.
Definitely. I will also include the link to that book in my show notes too, because I agree that that's a very interesting book and it opens up your mind to looking at the world a little bit differently too. And we're going to segue a little bit to talk about a different topic besides real estate investing. And this is super exciting, but you, Lauren, and your husband, Clint, are expecting your first kiddo. So I'm so excited for you.
Yes.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. We're excited. It's coming up quick.
Yeah, yeah, it's just around the corner here. So I was glad I was able to snag you on here for being a guest today. But I'm curious, with your first kiddo on the way, what type of financial planning and preparation have you guys been doing to feel more ready?
Yes, great question. So, again, going back to the goal um, topic, if you will, that I was talking about before, it's been, having kids and what to do with as far as work has been something we've thought about for the last like couple years. I think particularly as we've been real estate investing and chose to do that. And so, thankfully, it has not been something we've kind of been frantically trying to save, in the last couple of months, or, frantically do once we found out we were having a baby. And so it all just came back to, okay, a goal of ours is, how can we potentially be home more than not? And so with that came, how do we, saving and, living far below our means with a lot of things, calculating out what do we really need each month to live. And then from there, of course, you've got, travel funds and or travel expenses and things that are, you don't want to necessarily miss out on if you, can, or if you can avoid that. But doing that and having the, already having that goal on our mind of how can we potentially decrease hours as we have kids, with our jobs, mine particularly being a W-2, how can I go have that potential to maybe be at home, like I said, more days than not. And so it's been a kind of a journey, a more long journey of preparing, and just trying to be conscious of our financial choices so that we are able to build up more of a savings or more of an emergency fund, as we enter into parenthood and as we decide, or yeah, as we decide to what to do as far as hours with work, and can I go down, can I not? And so again, kind of a long answer, but that's really, it's been kind of a few years, I would say, of preparation, as far as, because we had that goal in mind. And so because of that, okay, how can we make some changes now that could potentially be a possibility when we eventually have kids.
That's awesome. I love that. And then besides real estate investing and preparing for your baby, what other financial moves have you guys done in addition to paying back some of your student loan debt over the years too?
Yeah, I would say we've done a bit of 401k investing. So investing in a 401k and a Roth IRA.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert at those. um, I will say it's been pretty minimal. It's been, I would, probably 95% real estate investing, and,
Sure.
more 5 around Roth IRA, or in the stock market, if you will.
Sure.
So that's where that is. And then, yeah, of course, hanging on to those student loans, but now that those are back in auto pay, so working on, getting those down.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, it sounds like the two of you have done tremendously well over the years since you haven't graduated that long ago from PA school. It sounds like only 5 short years. So that's amazing, all that you guys have done. So congrats on all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a fun journey, and we love talking about it because we were just in such a financial blah place. Um, and we had credit card debt too when we first got married, and so it feels really impossible at that point, but it's really fun now with where we're at, and the, so you could say sacrifices, that were made, that comes with, walking towards financial freedom. We just love to encourage people in that. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. And do you have any other words of advice for the listeners on their way to financial independence besides what we've covered so far today?
just reiterating, if it's something that you really want, you totally can attain it, as far as financial freedom, financial independence, and not to compare your journey to anybody else's, but just start with, really looking at where you're at. And then there's no shame in where you're at.
Right.
Even if it's negative $100,000 in credit card debt, there's no shame with where you're at. It's a starting place. And if you continue to persevere, it'll only get better from there.
Yeah.
So just, want to encourage, if it feels like a very, really impossible situation, that it's not, and little steps and little changes actually, you know, make the biggest difference. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I feel like so many people are scared to truly assess their finances and feel overwhelmed and just almost this feeling of being paralyzed to even get started. But just as you mentioned, it's really important that you face the facts and see where you're starting from. And like you said, any small step, you can only go up from there, right?
Totally. Yep.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat today, Lauren. If any of the listeners are interested in reaching out with you with questions or wanting to connect with you on social media or anything like that, would you mind sharing how they could touch base with you?
Yeah, I would say happy to have listeners reach out on LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn, Lauren Nievinski on there. I'd say that's a great way to reach out. So
Okay, cool. I'll include a link to your LinkedIn account in the show notes as well.
awesome.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time today, Lauren, and I'm so excited to see what the future holds for you and Clint and your new kiddo on the way on your way to financial independence. Thanks again.
Thanks, Kat, for having me. This was a fun conversation.
Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time,